Hello everyone, and welcome to our next video. This video is part of a series where we are implementing a microservices-based social media application. And our main goal is to learn about the microservices pattern, its challenges, and some of the solutions, how we can handle these challenges so that we can enjoy the full benefits of microservices. So here is an overview of what we are going to implement over the next few videos. This is not everything. We are currently working on our authentication service, and then we will work with the front-end client, Kubernetes, Kafka, sharing some code, and then a notification service. Here is a more detailed breakdown. We are working with the sign-up route, and as you can see, we have plans of working with sign-in, sign-out, current user, setting up the front-end client and designing a few visual components, and then implementing our basic sign up and sign in pages. And then working with the Kubernetes setup, Dockerizing the services, creating the necessary deployments, the services, and then integrating the MongoDB. We of course have other services that we will work on and other issues that we need to take care of, such as the post service, the chat service, perhaps some account service. We will come to this in details once we advance more over the setup. As you can see, here I stop at the Kubernetes setup, but we also have other things we need to take care of. In the previous video, we continued the implementation of our email sender, which is responsible for sending verification emails from the authentication service. We implemented a few tests, and now we will continue with its implementation. So the previous test, we are throwing an error if the email API is not set. You should check the previous video for a more detailed discussion about what the email API does. So here we will continue with our next test. So should send the email correctly if the email sender is active and the email API is set. This is an async function again because we need to wait, right? We need to await something here. So let me get my instance of email sender, and it's going to be equal to my email sender dot get instance. And then I will activate my email sender. And here I need some line of code, email sender dot set email API with my email API, right? So at the moment I have no email API and I have no set email API method. So of course this test is going to fail. There you go, doesn't even compile. So we first need an email API. And that's maybe where you get very excited and say, okay, finally we are going to implement the email API that is going to send the emails. And then I tell you, not really. We are going to work so that our tests pass. And then afterwards, we will go to our production code. We'll discuss a little bit what are the limitations of our current setup. And we will implement then the actual email API. So what is the problem here? The problem here is, if you can bear with me for a second, imagine the following. Let me add a couple of lines, right? Let's say that I create, so some comments here just so that it doesn't complain about formatting. So let's say that I create a node mailer API, right? I set it up, connect it correctly to the SMTP server, and then I pass this here to my email. So to my email sender. The problem is that every time I run the tests, NodeMailer will send an actual email, right? And this is a big problem because we want to run the tests always. As you can see, I am with the tests in watch mode, and every time we push something to the cloud, we would have a continuous deployment pipeline which would run these tests every time we create a pull request to master, and then we would get emails from there, right? And if there is some problem with the internet connection, for example, our tests would fail, not because the authentication service is faulty, but because there is no connection with the internet. So this is a very direct and let's call it non-test friendly way, right? What we normally do with tests is that we create a mock email API. Now there are multiple ways of doing this, and the first way that you can think of is you create an actual Node mailer API, and then you mock the methods, right? You mock the methods with jest and mocking in jest. And to be fully honest, while this is possible, for me this just seems like a lot of work, right? Because I particularly think that mocking an actual implementation, although we may have to use this in the future, it's sometimes very tricky. It's sometimes very tricky if we have a module which has multiple functions within the module, and sometimes we mock it one way depending on how we import that module, sometimes we mock another way. So there is no one unique specific way of doing this. So I don't really like this approach of creating the actual Node Mailer API. And now you may be starting to realize why we have this method set email API, right? Because I can create a mock email API, I can create a Node Mailer API, and I can create a MailJet API. And these three things, they don't really need to know about one another. The only thing I need to know and the only thing I need to do is that on my tests, I will set the email API as being the mock email API, the mock email API. And in my production code, then I'm free to decide whether I want to use the MailJet API or the Node Mailer API. If I create the mock email API, then it becomes very straightforward to mock whatever methods I want inside, because this whole thing is going to be mock driven, let's call it like this, or composed only of mocks. And this for me is the most straightforward and the most powerful way of mocking our email API. And this is what exactly we are going to start doing in this video. So let me erase a couple of lines here. And what I need to do first is to create this mock email API, right? So let's come to, let's say, test utils, and we will say here, we could put this under a directory, but I'll just create this directly here, mock email API.ts. And remember from the email sender class, or from the email sender file, that we exposed a type called email sender email API. And this type allows us to actually create a mock email API with the methods that we specify here. Now, this for me seems more like an interface. Why do I say it seems more like an interface? Well, because I think it was at the very beginning when we started typing and writing interfaces. Whenever we have a bunch of methods and behaviors that we expect from a class, right? Whenever we are talking about classes, for example, then for me it makes sense to have an interface, because the email sender class, it can implement an interface, but it's very hard to say that this is going to be of type, for example, email sender. So for example, if I type this as email sender, email API, right? And this I write as equal, and then here I try to type this as email sender, email API, then this is going to look very, very, very weird very quickly, right? So of course, it's not even going to compile, because a class can, the definition of a class and the definition of a type, they are not really compatible with one another. So classes, they can implement an interface, but I cannot force a class to be of a certain type. I can force methods of that class to be of a certain type, and this is what we are going to do. So here I will export an interface, which is called email sender email API. And then within my mock email, I will export a class, which is called mock email API and implements the email sender email API. Right, so now here I can work with the methods that I define in my email sender email API. Now let's see what happens if I change this to type. I'm actually curious about this, and I can still implement. So types can still be implemented as they would be as if they were interfaces, but I think that for the sake of clarity here, because of the way that other languages implement this and other languages have the concept of interfaces, I think it's better if we simply stick to the standards, right? So we will, whenever we implement something, that something is going to be an interface. So now here what's missing for my mock email API is an actual send email method, right? And this send email method at the moment is returning void, which doesn't really make sense for us. So what we want to return from the send email API, so the send email method, is the email sender send email response, right? And then here, for example, this would be actually the email API send email response, right? So let's see now. Here I think we'll have an error, and this email sender email API, so should be email API send email response, right? And this should also be email API send email response, because now the responsibility for sending the email is not of the email sender, but it is of the email API. So here I can also receive the args as being email API send email args. So now if I come back to my test or to my mock email API here, as you can see, I will have some problems with this send email API, right? So here it's saying that it's not assignable to the same property in the base type, and that's because I'm not passing the arguments nor returning anything. So here what I can do is to destructure this, let's say to email, right? And this, I believe I need to pass the type here, email API send email args, so that it doesn't complain. And here what I'm going to return is exactly a new object with a to email, and what is missing, a status of success. And then here I need to add the email API send email response. Right, so now my class knows that this send email is actually what it's implementing, what the email sender email API interface looks like. So now I have my mock email API. Let's go back to our tests and let's change the code here so that we have a new mock email API. So here I'm going to call mock email API is equal to new mock email API. And here I don't need to pass anything to my mock email API, right? So the only thing that I need to pass now is, or the next thing I need to implement is the set email API method. So let's have a look here. We have the email API. And if we go down here, we could perhaps, after the deactivate, this would be another method, set email API, which returns a void, and this should receive an email API, and this is going to be of type email API, email sender email API. And then what I'm going to do is this.email API is equal to email API, right? So now when I try to validate this email sender in this small helper function, then this is not going to fail. Now there is, okay, now it's not complaining. Let's see the test is going to pass, I suppose, but there is still a problem, right? I have a mock email API. However, I'm never calling this method, right? I'm never calling the method, the send email method. And what we can do here to change this is to come to the email, so the email sender class within the send email, which returns a promise of this email API send email response, right? This should also be a promise here. So what we can do is we can simply copy this code and change a little bit the mock email API. Now it's not returning a promise, so I need to adjust this here. And what we are going to do is, this is not a promise, so we will simply return the new promise here. Right, so this is going to be working as well. And now the next thing I need to do is within my email sender, I will simply return the this.email-api.sendEmail, and this is going to be called with my args argument, right? So the problem here that TypeScript is complaining is that it's saying that the email API is can be undefined. So a way of doing this would be, for example, to copy this into this code. Then it will stop complaining. The problem here is that the email API is already checked within a validate email sender, right? Within a validate email sender. So what we could do here is to simply tell TypeScript that the email API is going to be defined by using this exclamation mark. So I remember a few videos ago I said that I didn't like this, but I thought a lot about this and I couldn't find a straightforward way of showing or telling TypeScript that the email API is going to be actually defined, right? Because this logic to check that the email API is defined is actually somewhere else. So if I implemented, for example, the this.email-api.sendEmail within the validate email sender, then this would also work. So because I could not think of any better solution to this, what we're going to do is we will use this exclamation mark and I will adjust the configuration file in order to make that error that we got, transform it into a warning from TypeScript, right? So let's see what is going to happen now that I have this. So everything should still be working as expected. And my mock email API is going to be set within the email sender. So now what we can do is we can expect for the response, right? Await email sender dot send email. And here we will do exactly the same as this code. So maybe I just copy and paste here. And I would expect the res.toEmail.toEqual test@test.com. So let's see what is going to happen with our tests. And I expect that because we are calling the email sender.sendEmail, then this is going to be passed down to our mock email API. And once this solves, we can then check the response. Now, this pattern may be a little bit new to you. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but what we are doing here is that we are implementing the email sender, which will have virtually the same interface as the email sender email API. So here I can even say implements the email sender email API. And why can I do that? Well, because I want to have, or why should I do that? Is because I want to have the same methods within the email sender that I have in my email API. And this is because, as you can see here in my send email method, what this method is doing, it's acting like a proxy. Like it's passing this request further down to our actual email API. Now, this email API can be anything you want as long as it implements the interface email sender email API. And this gives us flexibility enough for us to use an API that is entirely for testing. It doesn't send any actual requests. It doesn't consume any of our quotas, and we can run the tests as many times as we want. Now, of course, there are benefits to actually testing the real email API, and perhaps in the future we will implement this, but this would be more of a integration test. So it's very hard for us to fully test the actual email API because this is implemented by a third party, right? And when it comes to third parties, we already discussed that several times, that we don't have, or it's not our responsibility to test the library, but it's the third party responsibility to ensure that the library is working. And if there are bugs in the library, there is nothing we can do in our code apart from handling the bugs in a more graceful way that perhaps they do in the library. So for our purposes here, we will be using a mock email API for our tests, and then we will populate this mock email API within our email sender whenever we are executing the tests from the email sender test file. So let me save this again, and everything should be working fine. And I think that this is enough progress for this video. So in the next video, we will continue with this implementation. We will do a few changes to the mock email API so that we can have a more precise idea or a more precise representation of its behavior. Until then, thank you very much for your time, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.